How about a little true crime today? My name is Jeffrey Luscombe. I'm the author of Shirts and Skins and To Refrain from Embracing. And if you've read my novels, um, I don't know who has. Like I've said in the last podcast, this is only my second one, that this isn't something that I'm sharing on other social media. I'm just using this right now as kind of an Easter egg for readers uh, that go and find it or run across it and maybe learn a bit more about my novels and about me. But to get back to true crime, my latest novel, To Refrain from Embracing, had a murder in it. And it was based on an actual murder that happened in Hamilton, Ontario in 1976, perpetrated by a fellow named John Rallo. Now, in my novel, I call him Ragno, which is Italian for spider. But the real life John Rallo murdered his wife, Sandra, and his two little kids, Stephanie and Jason, who were 5 and 6 at the time. And what John did, and they could tell by Sandra's body, is that he beat them and then he wrapped their bodies up in garbage bags and sleeping bags and anchored it with an anchor and threw them into the waterways around Hamilton, Ontario. He actually used the anchor off his boat uh, to to weigh down his wife. And eventually, Sandra and Stephanie were found, but the little boy Jason was never found. And he recently, John Rallo, just died a few months ago, and he never admitted to it. He never admitted to his guilt, and therefore he never told anyone where Jason was. Um, People assume that he was disposed of, sadly, in the same way as his mother and sister, but his body was never found, and John Rollo died not telling anyone. So, in my novel, To Refrain from Embracing, this is actually a large part of the novel because the boy in it, Josh, who's 10 years old, is becomes a little obsessed with this story, and it was something me and my friends at 10 years old, and like to hear this story about a father who kills his wife and his kids, and we would discuss it amongst each other about how this could happen. How could a father kill his children? Because it makes one feel, and it made us feel a little less safe knowing that this was a possibility. Because I think up to that point, um, we didn't think that was, and to have it so close to home, because one of the things, well, these waterways were close to where I grew up in East Hamilton, where they found these bodies, but also when they looked for evidence that John had not just the anchor from his boat, but he had bought cleaning supplies. He had taken a hunk of his carpet out, and I put these in my novel, but and thrown a carpet into the dump that was right near my house. Yeah, I didn't grow up in the best part of Hamilton. That's a part of the book as well, is growing up in a rather dodgy part of town and what that was like uh, as a Gen X kid. So eventually they took John. He was put on trial in 1977, and that's when my book To Refrain from Embracing is actually set. So this trial sort of permeates the book because the book is about a father who goes to the mental institution in Hamilton because he after a suicide attempt, and his wife is trying to work and keep the family together and not lose the house, even though they have this huge debt that the father had incurred and was one of the reasons he ended up in the mental hospital. And also their son, Josh, he was 10 years old, almost 11, and him trying to navigate understanding what is happening in his life and in his family and to himself. And all the while, this story is going on in the news, and Josh becomes a little obsessed with it. He keeps a notebook. He tells the story in current events in his class, in his fourth grade class. So yeah, so it was interesting. I was asked by a lot of people a few months ago when John died. finally, because he had been in jail a very long time. He probably would have got out earlier if he had confessed, but they kept him in there as long as I think they could, and then he got like partial parole, and then he just died. Like I said a few months ago, and people asked me what I thought of the death of John Rollo since I had written about it in To Refrain from Embracing, and I just thought, good. it's it's about time. Maybe that, I don't think that there was any justice that could have been made for these three humans that he took brutally and discarded that way, which was really horrific. And when you're 10 years old and you're trying to understand this, 10, 11, 12, whatever I was at the time, it I think it stays with you for a long time. And with the first book, Shirts and Skins, I also bring up there was another murder in the 40s in Hamilton. It was done by well, she was acquitted, but a woman was on trial because her husband's body was found, but not his whole body, just his torso. And I'm going to discuss that at a later time because it actually comes up in the book I'm finishing now. Her name was Evelyn Dick, and she was put on trial for this, and she was convicted, and then it went to appeal, and she was acquitted, and but there's other parts of this story that are kind of really gruesome, and I'll talk about them at another time. But yeah, that story was in Shirts and Skins. The Rollo story was in To Refrain from Embracing, and so this idea of crime and murder, it was really a part of the city that I grew up in Hamilton, Ontario, which it 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 isn't Pleasantville. It was a steel town. There was crime, um, and so we were sort of navigated through that as well, as kids, and how we dealt with these things and trying to keep safe and being Gen X when you didn't have a lot of help at staying safe. To be perfectly honest, we were just sort of like off you go on your own, and we were supposed to know how to deal with these things. And for the most part, we dealt with it however we were taught. We sort of figured it out as we went along. And but that was part of being Gen X. And I said this in the first podcast is I don't want to romanticize this. The drinking from hoses and not coming home to the stoplights came on and making our own lunch at 6 years old, and all of that is true. That's exactly the way it was. But there was a darker side to this when you are just left completely on your own, and it's sort of like you have this feral band of kids, sometimes looking out for each other, sometimes not, and hurting each other. And so we at Gen X sort of deal with this trauma. My first podcast was about trauma. Was dealing with this trauma in our own way. And often, if you know Gen X people, and we seem to be sarcastic, and we laugh at things that are quite dark in our own life, because that sort of laughter is our trauma response, because not all of us learned how to deal with our trauma. And with me, with the trauma that I grew up with, um, I write about it. So when I whether it's Rallo or Evelyn Dick or any other trauma that I went through, is I sort of take it, hold it, and put it on paper. And that's how I deal with it. I don't know if it's the best way to deal with trauma. I don't know. I'm not a psychiatrist. I've never been to one. Like most Gen X people, we handle things on our own. Not the best way a lot of times. But that's how I deal with trauma, is writing about it and laughing about it, and being sarcastic about it, and seeing how maybe it can how I can live with it and work with it, or make sure other people don't have to go through it. But that's sort of how we dealt with this trauma. So John Rollo died a few months ago, which is fine by me. This is his story. or his true crime episode here on my podcast. But I don't know. Do you remember the Rallo case? You would if you were from Hamilton. You definitely would remember this, at least the feelings if you were a kid about what it was like to feel so vulnerable um, as uh, as this kid disappears. And like Josh said in the book, when they stopped looking for Jason's body, which they did, I remember this. Uh, it, the police saying and hearing on the radio like, oh, they've stopped looking. And Josh in my novel said, wow, like I hope if I ever disappear, they wouldn't stop looking for me. But the truth is they do. And that was one thing that we had to confront as children, because no one shielded us from anything. Gen X, they just the paper was there, the TV was there. We heard all that. We heard all of this, and so that's what it was like. That's the John Rallo story. If anyone has any comments about what you know about it, or you went through a similar thing, let me know in the comments. The funny thing is, like I said, this is sort of an Easter egg, and I don't advertise this podcast anywhere. So it's sort of like my secret, the secret podcast of Jeffrey Luscombe at the moment, at the Jeffrey Luscombe podcast. Put a lot of thought into that name, the Jeffrey Luscombe podcast, and I don't know how long I'm going to do this. Might be this might be the last one. Maybe there'll be more. I don't know, but I'm just going to keep it on the down low for now, um, and not make too big a deal out of it. And if people find it, and if my readers find it, and they want to, to learn a little bit more about me and my work and where it comes from, and I enjoy sharing that. And maybe sometime we'll expand it a bit and have guests on and other writers, and we can discuss books. I don't know uh, how exactly this is going to be. Books, Gen X, true crime, all of that mixed up together, writing, and that's the Jeff Luscombe podcast for what it's worth. And it's probably not worth much, but that's just the way it is. So thanks again for listening. This has been fun. And we will do it again sometime, I guess. Maybe I'll throw it up on YouTube. I don't know. I don't even know how. But maybe we'll do that. But until next time, thanks for listening, and thank you very much.